Hi there, this is Terry from stampinmagic.com. Welcome back to my channel. Today's project is this beautiful magic window card. It measures 6 inches by 6 inches, and when you open it up, this window inside opens gradually to show you the hidden image or message. The stamp set I've used is the Love What You Do, and I've used 3 of the images from this set. It stands up beautifully, and on the back I've placed a panel where you can write your message. The belly band I created for this card is just a little bit tight, so I'm going to loosen that up a little for today's card. Let's get started. I'm going to start with a piece of Melon Mambo card, and this measures 12 inches by 6 inches, and I'm going to score it at 3 inches and 9 inches. We need 2 pieces for the sliding mechanism, and these measure 4 7/8 by 4 inches, and each of these needs to be scored at 4 3/8 of an inch. We're going to work on the 2 mechanism pieces first, and you want to draw a line down the centre of each piece. So because they're 4 inches wide, draw your line at 2 inches. Next, you want to make a pencil mark along that line at 1 7/8 of an inch, and this is on the end that hasn't been scored. Do that on both pieces. The next thing we need to do is to cut from the bottom corners up to that pencil mark that you made, and this creates a banner shape on each of the pieces. Now you may find it useful to draw a pencil line first from each of the corners to that pencil mark, and then cut along the lines, just as I'm showing here. When you've finished, fold on the score lines and reinforce those folds with your bone folder. On your base card, fold on the 2 score lines that you made and reinforce the folds with your bone folder. Make sure that the 2 ends meet in the centre of the card and there are no gaps. The centre Pacific point layer measures 5 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. The Garden Impressions strips measure 5 1/2 inches by 1 1/2 inches. Now you will only see the corner sections from these strips, which is why I haven't done a full piece, but you can put a full piece on there if you prefer. All the measurements you need to create this card will be in the corresponding blog post on my blog, and I'll make sure I put a direct link to this in the description below. So I'm adding glue to each of those paper pieces, and I'm going to stick those on the sides of the Pacific Point card, and I'm using Tombow multi-purpose adhesive. I love this glue because of the extra wiggle room that you get. It gives you a few seconds just to position it exactly where you want it. Add glue to the back of this layer and then position it into the middle of the card. The remaining panels on the front of the card and on the inside of the card are all the same size. Okay, so you need 4 pieces of Pacific Point cardstock measuring 5 3/4 inches by 2 3/4 inches. And then you need 4 pieces of the Garden Impressions papers measuring 5 1/2 inches by 2 1/2 inches. So layer the paper onto the Pacific Point mats and then position these on each of the remaining panels. The top layer of the center panel that holds the mechanism in place needs to be stamped. Now again, I'm using Pacific Point for this top layer, which measures 5 3/4 inches by 3 3/4 inches. And I'm using Pacific Point ink and the little floral image from the set just to randomly stamp all over this panel. The melon mambo piece that this is layered onto measures 6 inches by 4 inches. To finish this centre panel, I need to cut out the aperture, and to do this I use the Layering Ovals framelets. To cut out the outside of the scalloped frame, I used the largest of the scalloped ovals. For the inside of the frame and also the aperture itself, I used one of the smooth-edged ovals. This one is the 3rd largest in the set. I also used the 2nd largest when I created the belly band, and this is for the coloured layer that goes underneath the image panel. It's very important when you cut the aperture that you centre it accurately. Now mine is centred and I've checked this by measuring. You should have 1 3/8 of an inch above and below the die, and also 13/16 of an inch on either side of the die. If you don't cut this accurately, then you may find when you open and close the card that you haven't got a centered image. To make the frame, I'm using the same oval framelit as we used for the aperture, and I've cut that from a piece of scrap melon mambo. Then I'm using the larger scalloped oval framelit to cut around the outside, and this will produce a frame for our card. I'm securing that with purple tape, which is a very low tack tape. And then I'll stick the frame to that centre panel. I've decided to emboss my main image this time, so I have a large scrap piece of our Whisper White cardstock, and I'm just using my embossing buddy to remove any static. Then I have 2 images from the Love What You Do set, and I'm going to emboss with clear powder. The black ink pad I'm going to use is VersaFine. Now this stays wet for quite a long time, so it gives you ample opportunity to emboss. So I'm stamping my main image first into the centre, and then I'm going to stamp the other image on the right hand side. I'll cover that with clear embossing powder and then heat set it with my heat gun. I'm going to stamp that smaller image onto the left hand side this time, and I've just created a mask to cover that flower. So I've stamped it onto masking paper and then cut it out. Then I can stamp my image over the top of it and that flower is protected. Then all I have to do is peel that mask away. Again, cover with clear embossing powder and then heat set with the heat gun. I'm going to start the colouring with Melon Mambo ink, and I'm going to use an aqua painter. Now because I'm using the normal white Whisper White cardstock, I have to be careful not to get the image too wet, otherwise it will start to pill. I'm picking up the ink from the outside area so it's not too intense, it's not too dark. I'm just going to colour all my flowers. Once that's done, I'm going to go into the middle of the lid this time, and I'm going to pick up some of the darker ink, and I'm going to add that to the bottom of each of the petals. I'm going to use Pacific Point ink to colour all the little berries or buds on the other images. Then I'll use my clear Wink of Stella pen to go over everything that I've coloured. The Wink of Stella gives this beautiful sheen to whatever you put it on. The two mechanism pieces need to be fitted centrally onto the base card, so we need to make some pencil marks to help us do this. So on each side panel, I'm measuring up from the bottom edge and down from the top edge 1 inch and making a mark. And I'm making the mark on the edge of the Pacific Point layer. The edge of the mechanism piece will be fitted against the edge of the Pacific Point layer between those two pencil marks, and then it will fold in towards the middle of the card. Now what we have to do is ensure that that line, top and bottom, where the two mechanism pieces meet, is straight. If it's off slightly, then it will affect how our secret image is displayed. It won't look central. The glue goes on the narrow scored sections, and I'm doing both of these together. And then I'm placing them against the edge of the Pacific Point between the pencil dots, and I'm just pressing it down very lightly, just in case I have to move them slightly in a moment. So I'm doing the same for the second one, again against the edge of that Pacific Point, and I'm just pressing it down very lightly. Then I'll fold them both in and check the top and bottom edge, and just make sure that they're straight and adjust them if necessary. And once I'm happy, I can press those glued areas down firmly. I've trimmed my image panel down just slightly, and I'm just checking here to make sure it's small enough to be covered by that central panel. And I can see there's a little piece sticking out, so I'm going to trim that off, and eventually I'll trim the other side as well. Then I can add glue to the back and position it. Now when I position it, I'm again not going to press it down fully, just very lightly, so I can adjust the position based on the mechanism if I need to. Once you're happy with the position, then you can press it down fully. The next thing we need to do is add the central panel. Again, to ensure that it is centered on the base card, we need to make some pencil marks, and this time I'm measuring inwards from the score lines at the sides 1 inch again. So I'm doing that on the top and on the bottom. When adding the center panel and applying the glue, you just want to put a narrow strip of glue on the top and bottom edge. If you make it too thick, then it will make the mechanism too stiff, and it could cause it to buckle when you're opening and closing the card. Make sure that the points on your mechanism are positioned correctly. One side should be sat on top of the other side. Make sure they're not caught underneath each other. And then you can position the center panel between those pencil marks that you made earlier. I've stamped, embossed and coloured the images for the back panel exactly as I did before. Now the white panel measures 4¼ inches square and the Pacific Point panel measures 4½ inches square. The sentiment on my original card came from the Birthday Banners stamp set, but I'm going to use a different one for my card today. I've chosen one from the Varied Vases stamp set, and this one reads, "You are simply the best." I have a 1/2 inch strip of Whisper White cardstock and I'm using Melon Mambo ink. I'm just going to stamp that in the middle of the strip and then I'll trim it down to the size I want. Once I've got it to the size I want, I'm going to flag cut the ends. I do this by making a small centre cut on each edge and then I come in from each of the points. Now I'm going to add a few mini dimensionals to the back, take off the backings, and then I'll add it to my card. I've cut all the pieces I need to decorate the belly band. Now the image panel was created exactly as I did before, and this was cut out using the 3rd largest layering oval. The Pacific Point one is the 2nd largest oval, and then I've used the largest scalloped oval to cut 2 Melon Mambo pieces. I've glued the image panel onto the Pacific Point oval and then I'll add dimensionals onto the reverse. I have 2 strips to create the belly band. Now the Melon Mambo strip is 12 inches by 1 3/4 inches. The Pacific Point strip is 1½ inches wide. Now it doesn't really matter what length this one is. I've used our A4 cardstock length, but you could use 11 inches or 12 inch cardstock. I've stamped it using the small floral image that I used earlier on the card. I'm going to layer these together and I'm going to position the Pacific Point strip centrally onto the Melon Mambo strip. So if the strip is less than 12 inches long, you'll have a gap at each end. And this won't matter because once we do the oval panel, that will cover any gaps. Now I'm going to score the band at 2 7/8 of an inch and also at 9 inches. Fold the band carefully on those scored lines and reinforce the folds with your bone folder. I've cut an extra scalloped oval from some copy paper and I'm going to use this to help me ensure that when I position the decorative panel onto my belly band that I get it straight. So I'm folding the copy paper oval in half to get the centre line, and then I'm going to add some repositionable glue to the back of it. Then I'm going to add this onto the middle of my card, ensuring that centre line matches the opening on the front of my card. Then all I need to do is lay one of the Melon Mambo ovals onto that copy paper oval, and I know it's straight. So I'm just adjusting the belly band just to make sure that's central within the oval. and then I can add glue and stick each side down. I can remove the copy paper oval as soon as one side is in place. The second Melon Mambo oval can then be positioned on top of the first one, and this will cover the ends of the belly band. Then you can remove the backs from the dimensionals and position the image panel. To finish off, I'm just going to add some small basic pearls onto each flower. And there you have it, the card is complete. I love this style of card. I think it offers a great wow factor for anyone who receives it. It's quite an involved card to make, but it's quite simple if you break the steps down. Here are the two cards together. Which one's your favourite? I think I prefer my original one, which is Mango Melody and Night of Navy, but I think both look really pretty. Now I have created another video that shows you how to create a box for this card, so don't miss out on that. I'll put a link somewhere on the screen if I can work out how to do it, or if not, there'll be a link on the end screen and in the description below. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this project. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe and press that notifications bell so you don't miss out on any future projects. Bye for now.